Hi there, welcome back. In this short video, we are going to learn about Microsoft Configuration Manager first time configuring. So for example, you might have to install SCCM client or ConfigMgr client, or you wanted to configure the server as a first step, right? So that's what we are going to learn in a technical demo step by step. So this is going to be more into the demo purpose. However, I might touch a bullet points with a PPT. Just in case if you're quite new, I have already covered or created a complete step-by-step lab creation along with all these videos are part of this ConfigMgr training playlist. This can be actually viewed by going to this link, simply tinyurl.com/mscm-training. So that would include all the videos within this series. Before we jump into the quick demo on Configuration Manager for the configuration steps, let's actually understand a little bit on the base version versus in-console update. So the base version is your media that is available in your portal to download after you purchase, or if you're trying evolution copy when you try to download, you would be getting very similar to this. One would be the year, that's a 23 is the year and 03 is a month, and here 22 is a 2022 and 11th month. So similarly you might expect another update on 2023 around close to November. Between you might see some kind of another update. That's how they are gonna split it. So in a year, 2 releases will be available. Out of that, they would come up with one of the version as a base version. In between, if you want to upgrade, for example, you installed maybe 2111 example and you want to upgrade to 2203, you have to update from in console. So within the console you have an option to update it. So the software, that's a configuration manager specific latest updates, security patches, all of that stuff will be available within the console, and you would be just right click and getting the update. That's also we're going to cover. So that being said, let's first understand the what we are going to configure. So of course, once you configure example, you can configure a different set of roles, like somebody can only configure the software updates, or maybe software distribution or patch management, or maybe a specific to remote controls like that. You could use the built-in roles, or you could create your own RBAC rules also. That is also possible. Now we'll also understand why we have to do Active Directory integration, what is the advantages within this video, and we also learn the discovery methods within this video, which is part of your configuration step by step. And also we will learn about the boundaries and boundary groups. This is also would be covered within this video shortly. Okay, so just try to remember these words so that you could easily get it what we are going to configure. Similarly, client installation methods we would be learning, and also one of the client installation method also we would be using to install the ConfigMgr client. Similarly, the most important roles we would be having a look on it. That being said, let's jump into each of the point specific step-by-step demo, and whenever it is required, I would be using the whiteboard or these slides to explain to you in a better way, because the designing or the configuration, you need to know why we are doing these steps, because the configuration can be done in a short time, like 5-10 minutes. You could easily finished up complete configuration, but that doesn't mean that you are actually know why and what is the importance of that configuration. You're gonna do it right. So you need to better understand why we are performing all these. So if you just go through the previous slides, these all are involved in the configuring ConfigMgr and its importance we would be understanding. It's almost 5 minutes. Let's jump into the quick demo. So I just open the ConfigMgr console by going to the Microsoft Configuration Manager. This is where you have the ConfigMgr console. So once you are open up this console, you might see here Microsoft Configuration Manager. This is the latest name. In the past, it used to be Endpoin Manager or System Center Configuration Manager. Now, this product, that is the ConfigMgr, is part of Microsoft Intune family product. Within this Intune family, one of the product called earlier we used to call it as SCCM, right? So the same product has been rebranded under Microsoft Intune family called ConfigMgr or Configuration Manager. Okay, that being said, the first steps that you need to learn about the navigation. So most of the stuff you would be configuring under administration. Of course, we are going to learn more about the assets and complaints in a minute. So within this, normally the user devices, user specific objects or device specific collections can be created. So I'm going to talk on that when it comes to the collections. But before that, let's understand administration. Administration is the place that you are going to configure most of the configuration related to ConfigMgr or Configuration Manager. So in this case, so we would be doing couple of steps. Just to make it very clear to you, there is no step like you first have to follow this order, that order kind of thing. Whatever is the better order, I'm going to teach you. So the first thing first, you install ConfigMgr, right? Let's understand you have installed the ConfigMgr in this location on one of the server, right? So consider this could be one of your office location. Let's name this as some location called Hyderabad or New York. So I'm just naming as this as a HYD or NYC or New York, whatever you call it, in this case HYD. So this is where you install the ConfigMgr. Now think about this configuration manager server or your SCCM server, or you call it as a Microsoft Configuration Manager Server or MCM. So this server is going to manage workstations, right? W stands here workstations, S stands here servers. So you wanted to definitely manage your workstations and servers and also the users. This is where you install. By installing this, what do you mean by manage? Let's say you want to deploy some software, or you want to patch it, or you want to do some kind of remote control on those machines, or you want to take the hardware inventory or software inventory. All of that is SCCM offering features, you want to perform it. Okay, but now question comes here, how would I only manage within this Hyderabad location? Why can't I manage Delhi location? So it all depends, right? What is the depends? What is that configuration that have to be defined so that this ConfigMgr server is going to manage only in this Hyderabad location, and so that it doesn't come here. So meaning you have to set somewhere some configuration. That's what I'm trying to say. So the first step that we wanted to configure would be the boundaries. So let's understand what is boundary. So meaning, so this server is gonna only configure or will be used only within this boundary, meaning so we are configuring here some kind of boundary location. So what is that boundary? Boundaries can be configured if you can think about it practically. All these machines will have some IP address. So meaning within this Hyderabad location, definitely a proper subnet will be there. So you can configure as a subnet as your boundary, or let's talk about another way. You can configure your IP address ranges, right, my friends? So IP address ranges also can be your boundary. Or if you have already Active Directory configured properly, you can use your Active Directory sites and services. If you just open up your sites and services, you would see there different site names, and every site will be assigned with a subnet, meaning you're just depending on your Active Directory. So you might not be your as the Active Directory administrator, but if you are the AD admin, you might know that when you configure multiple Active Directory domains on the sites, you would actually assign or create that location specific subnets, and then you would be assigning to the required sites. For example, here Toronto has this subnet 192.168.120, 28 series, and this is a 24 series for other site. This is how you would be configuring. So what you do, you would also use AD sites, meaning you simply depend on AD or Active Directory team for the boundaries. So now let me put it in the easiest way. As a first step, we actually configured boundaries. So boundaries, somewhere we say that, hey, you must have to serve the purpose. Okay, now I'm putting the right words, friends. So if you look at within this boundary, meaning within this boundary means how I'm defining, I can use some kind of subnet, or I'm using or, not as an AND case. Okay, or either use a subnet if you know, or if you know the IP address range, you use that IP address range, or if you have already AD sites, use that AD sites as your boundary. So what happens? What happens, my friends, if I configure as a boundary? What happens is, within this boundary, meaning either any of the machine having the site name or IP address range or a subnet, this would actually can download the content. So we have to say, in other words, boundaries are useful for content related. What is that content? For example, you push the software. So what happens to that software? The software has to be downloaded. Where it has to download? It shouldn't go to Delhi. Okay, Delhi. There could be some other configuration manager site, uh, another site. So this has been connected over the WAN example. This client shouldn't go here to download, because this line is maybe just a 10 MB. Okay, and you want to download 4 GB. All these clients will go, for example, to this side. The bandwidth link will go down, right? So we shouldn't be using this kind of configuration, right? So we have to say, hey, you must have to use only available subnet, within that subnet, whatever the configuration manager site we are defining, from there only download the content. This is what I'm trying to say. So boundary is useful for content. What else boundaries can offer you? It can offer you the site code. So if you if you consider, in the past I talked multiple times in a multiple videos, SCCM client, the client software that communicate with your configuration manager server, always try to connect to the site with the site code information. So the site code is very important. So if you do not if this client machine is not getting a site code, it means that it doesn't know where it has to report, where it has to download the policy, where it has its content server. So like that, it will be blank if it doesn't have a site code. So that site code will be also given by your boundaries. So boundaries are very useful for this time. I hope you understand this. If you have any question, post it in the down. I would be responding within 10 minutes of time. It could be day or night. I challenge that. You just post as the new question, not as a response to somebody's. Okay, I would be 100% answers to you. Now you know about the boundary, but let's also talk about something called a boundary group. So what exactly boundary group? So let's take an example for the boundary group. Let's think that a boundary group is a group of boundaries. That's called the boundary group, right? But what is the purpose? So if you look at the name itself, it says that group means a collection of boundaries. So let's say you think that there is a region called India. Within that India sub-regions, you could take the metropolitan cities, like where your offices exist, like Hyderabad or Delhi, Chennai, or Bangalore. Okay, all these are different boundaries. So when you group them, okay, you call this as the one of the region name. For example, I can group all these 4 different cities offices to one boundary location called region India. Okay, similarly you might have another region, maybe US. So within that US, maybe you could have multiple locations. All these locations you can consider as a one of the boundary group. So now the question comes, why do I need to group it? So by grouping, let's say in one of the location is down, or maybe from Delhi location also, you could download the content. directly from India region. So within that location, whatever the sites are available can be downloaded the content. That's where it is useful. So for higher availability, I would say, and also it serves your purpose. Maybe the offices are fully connected with a high speed, then this is very useful for you to grouping. Otherwise, you might have to group in a multiple groups and then the content can be downloaded. And also you could also say only the content should be downloaded from Hyderabad location, but the Delhi and Chennai, Bangalore and Hyderabad locations can use the site code assignment can be done from India region boundary group. This is also you could configure. So there are two purposes it solves. One is giving the site code, as I said earlier, site code and also the content, right? So this content and site code can be splitted in terms of the boundary groups. Let's go into a demo and better understand. But in a quick way to explain to you, we have a boundaries and the boundaries will be part of the boundary groups. And we would be using some kind of subnets or IP address range or AD site names as the boundaries. And once you made it boundaries, you have to group it to boundary group. Then only it will be useful. That being said, let's log into your ConfigMgr server and start configuring. So in my case, I have to navigate to administration and navigate under hierarchy configuration. This is where the first time configurations we would be doing. So you see here something called the boundaries and also boundary groups. Okay, before I jump into the boundaries and boundary groups, I wanted to show you the client locations. So once the machines are available, you would be able to see under assets and compliances, under device collections, there are close to 6 different default collections are created. So collections are nothing but a group of objects. Let's say all systems, all computers are part of this collection. So in future you might be using, you want to deploy for only Hyderabad location some software, you could do that, okay, by creating a collection. So you could create a device collection. Similarly, you could also create a users collection also. So you can straightforward target to a user called Chris in this example, or you could also create a group based, like all employees in India region. You could actually create that as the collection, or AD group based also you could create a collection. So you have two different collections so that the resources will come into that collection, and later point you can target some application, some softwares can be deployed, or patch management can be done, or some additional configurations can be targeted by using the device collections or user collection. That's the idea. Okay, now why I came here is, if you just double click all systems, because that's where you have more machines. And you see here INHYD is one of the computer name, so that is nothing but the current machine. You see here host name INHYD-CM01. This computer is already part of here, but you do not see my domain controller, all of that, because that will come as part of your discovery method. So what I'm trying to say is, we are trying to configure discoveries at this point of time, but we have not done any kind of discovery of what is this workstation, what is this user, or the username, and the number of Windows servers or number of workstations, and if so workstation Windows 10 or Windows 11. We did not discover that. That is a after configuring your boundaries, you would be configuring. There is no order for this. You could configure first as the boundary or boundary groups, or you could even configure first as the discovery. There is no specific order, my friends, but I wanted to go in this order: first boundaries, then boundary groups, then the discovery. So the discovery would discover all the objects within that region, okay, or within the specified location. But in this point of time, or at this point of time, there's only one machine, which is the self server, that is the SCCM server itself. On its own it has come up and it is showing. So remaining three we would talk about later point. These are not really computers. These are the default things which are used for a different purpose. It doesn't relevant for this lecture, but we would be touching on them later point of time. But now this machine has a client is installed, no, and there is no site code. You see here there's no site code. So what is our site code? The site code is the lab during the installation we have done. How do I find out? If you just go to the administration, sites and configuration, you could see here under sites, this is where the site code on this machine, that is a server name. This is a server, which is the same server. You see here INHYDCM01. On this machine, we installed as a primary site with a site code, and this is an active site. Okay, and this is a name which is going to cover entire India region. Now, as a next step, if you must have to remember this, my friends, here the site code is not there. Reason, if you could capture my previous theory, you should be able to understand, hey, I don't have a boundaries, that's why the machine is not assigned here with a boundary. That's why there is no site code, right? So I've been trying to explain earlier, if you have configured properly your sites, that's the boundaries and boundary groups, you might get it here a proper site code. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you here. Later point, when I refresh, you might have to notice this, the site code would automatically comes up here. Okay, you might be have a question like, I did not install client, but still I will get it here a site code. Yes, my friends, it will be showing here still the site code, because it is something called a assigned, meaning even though there's no client, it can use the site code. You might have a multiple sites, but it can use lab site. How? Because we are going to configure the boundaries, right? So let's configure the boundaries. Okay, as I said, first step would be the configuring boundary. So right click, create a boundary. Now when you try to create a boundary, the boundary types are available. You see here you have a multiple options. I did talked about only 3 things for easy explanation, like IP subnet I talked, IP address range I talked about the active directory side, but you could even add your VPN. Okay, you could even add your IPv6 prefixes. These additional things also can be configured based on your requirement. The idea is the same. At the end, you are gonna configure, for example, I have, for example, 10 series. Okay, example 25.25.25.0. What would happen? This would take, this is a subnet. That's how it is gonna create a boundary. Now, once we create a boundary, during this process, you have additional tab called, hey, can I add this boundary to any of the boundary group? You see here, this is where the boundary group is available. By default, one group will be there. This is called the default site boundary group. This gets automatically created. If you wanted to know why, just think about in this scenario. Earlier we were talking about this is a boundary and boundaries, right? So what if I have an additional location? I recently started a different location within India, for example Ahmedabad. So within that Ahmedabad location, I have a very small office, but I forgot to include in my boundaries or boundary groups. So what would happen to these client machines? So definitely they don't get the content, they don't get the site code information. It doesn't mean that you're not going to manage, but you have to manage them also, just in case if you forget, right? So to address these kind of scenarios, you can use the default site group, and you can view here, hey, do you want me to configure any of the site that is gonna assign, just in case if this site was boundary was missing, or you want to fall back to this DP, fall back to software update point, fall back to management point, meaning if within that boundary there is no management point, there is no software updates point, there is no DP to give the content, fall back to this server. That's how you're going to configure for default boundaries. So we are going to play with this later point, but for now let's create the boundary. So we are in process of creating boundary. So what is our subnet? So in my case, if I just give ipconfig, so it's actually 192 series with 168.31.0 series. So I would simply give here similar a boundary as 192.168.31.0. It starts with subnet mask class C. So automatically it has identified as the subnet ID as this. And you might have to give a proper description so that you could easily identify. So I would give here India example, and boundary group, we would be creating a boundary group later point. So I just applied. So what I've done, I created as a boundary as a type is subnet. Next step would be creating a boundary group. So I'm going to create a new boundary group. I'll say, hey, this is for India region. Okay. So within this India region, I could add my boundary. So I have already created a boundary, right, in the previous step. So I would simply select this as the boundary group. So now this is where it's going to talk about, hey, you have created a boundary group. Fantastic. But what you're going to do with this. So if you read here, it talks about the site assignment. Okay, meaning if a client machine is there, what is that site code to be assigned? So I wanted to assign the site code definitely. Okay, you must have to configure this, otherwise client never receives the site code. Second thing is the this is the first option. If you see here, this is the first option for the site assignment. This is for the site server. You might have multiple servers, multiple DP locations, as I said earlier. For example, within this India region, we are creating as a boundary group as India, right? So within this India region, you might have one location for Hyderabad, one location for Bombay, one location for Calcutta, one location for Chennai, right? So all these locations are available, but what is that server is going to used for content? So if there is a client machine, this client machine has to download content from only within this region. That's what you're going to specify here. So I would take this checkbox as a first step so that the site code would be assigned. Now the second step, the important step, would be the content related. If you just go through this by pausing this, you would understand the three different roles that is going to assign by clicking on adding here. So one would be the management point for your policies, second one for your DP for content, third one for your storing the user migration data, just in case if you're trying to migrate the user content, it would be used USMT tool specific, that would be. And the last one would be the software update point. So you can split these things also. So I would take this server for my policy, for management point, my DP, my state migration point, and software update points. So all of these three will be serving by this server because I install only one server. What if you have multiple sites? You might have to think in this way. As I said earlier, you would be considering India region example. You might have multiple regions, so according to that you have to select here. Okay, by clicking here, you might be taking the check boxes. It would be showing here multiple things based on your requirement. You would be taking. How would I know? If you ask, so what is your connectivity between these sites? Okay, is it a fast connect? Is that okay if your client is coming from this location to this location and get the download? If you're not going to allow, you might not be selecting it. Okay, so that's what it defines. So I would simply click on OK, apply. So what would happen now? A boundary group has been created. So if I just go here, India region, one member count. What is that one member count? This is a boundary group. So even the group count also become as a 1. Okay, and the site server also become as 1. So site servers, you might have 4 metropolitan cities, you might have an office, you might have their clients, then you might be having their DP, then you might be configuring that DP for content within this region. That's what we're talking about it. Okay, so now you know the boundary, you know the boundary groups. Now let's also try to create one more type of boundary group so that you can get more familiarity with this. So in this case, I wanted to go with active directory sites. So what I can do is I can simply browse and I should be able to get it here, all the location. So just in case if you are using production, you might see multiple sites. In the past also I did talk about it. If you remember, I shown you like this here, Toronto or different locations. So somebody might have configured all these sites properly. Okay, so for the first time when they install only single Active Directory, maybe in your lab, then you might have to rename this to default hyphen first hyphen site name to some other name. So that's what I've done in my case to Hyderabad. Later point, you can assign the subnets by right clicking here and assign subnets, and these subnets would be assigned to different sites. For example, Singapore, New York, San Jose. So these are the locations have different subnets. Okay, so that being said, now I would be taking all these information. Here I can say Hyderabad 80 site. Now, since I have already created a site boundary group, I can simply even apply OK and come back here, that is the boundary group, and assign. Or I can, during the process of creating boundary, I could even right click, the add, and select the boundary group also. So now what happens, the group count should change to 0 to 1. If I just click refresh, it has changed, and in the boundary group it has to come as a member count as 2. Why? If I just go to the properties, one with the AD site name, other one would be the subnet specific. You could also create some additional boundary groups, for example IP address range. So for example, I wanted to cover 192.168.31.0. That's where my IP starts, and it might end with 255 example. So between these numbers, everything including the number. For example, if I give 1, and if I give, because any IP doesn't have ending with 55, so I'll just give 54. So IP range for Hyderabad location. So what would happen? This also now becomes as a part of India region. So any of these IP addresses automatically part of your boundary group, so that the content can be downloaded. If you still have any doubt, please my friends, pause here and read this site assignment and site system services for your boundary related, what it is going to give you. It's going to give you the management point, it's going to give you the DP, SMP, we call it as the state migration point, software update point. This is where it's going to be useful. And now you have additional tabs also. This is where the fallback, just in case if this boundary group of machines are down, the sites are down, you can always fall back to another site. You could also configure here P download. So the users or the computers will download from each of the machine, can download from its own peer. Like if it is having the same subnet series, it can download if you just choose these kind of configuration, which we would be covering in depth in the upcoming lectures. So but you could see here, during the P downloads, only use P's within the same subnet. You could take it, so it's going to allow P downloads in this boundary group. Preferred distribution points over the P's within the same subnet, meaning it's not going to go and download instead of the DP. It actually downloads all the time from its own clients, nearby clients. That's how you could configure. And also a relationship, so this could be configured as a fallback. Let's say if this is down, I wanted to fall back to my default, because my default site boundary might have my cloud management point, or my cloud DP might be configured there. So it might fall back to that after waiting 120 minutes. Within that 120 minutes, or within that 2 hours window time, the client is not getting any content, it will fall back to this location. Or you could configure never fall back. So these are the configurations that you should be able to configure at the high level, in depth, these boundaries. Okay, so that's what this configuration, I'm talking about the boundaries. Now if I still go to the assets, and you could see here still the machine is site code is nothing. And if you see all devices collections, I could right click update membership. What would happen the update membership is every collection will have some kind of query in the backend. So if you see the membership, it has some kind of query which you cannot see for the built-in collections, but otherwise you should be able to create your own query and then you should be able to modify, but the membership has to be updated, right? Because let's see if there is a new mission has been added. So how do you see is you would directly right click on that to update the collection membership, like this, update membership, so that it would check if anything is recently added. So in this case it is just hourglass is showing for querying to anything is updated. So if I just refresh, it's gone. The count still, member count, you see here member count is still 4, right? Double click on it, so it might see here the site code now. The reason being we have configured properly the site code. So without the client it will fall back to the site code. This is very important. Let's say you might be working in your production, you might see this is a very great trick if a client machines are the discovered objects, because the next step would be the discovery. We are going to do all these discovery methods. We're going to perform discovery. Once it is discovered, the machines will be automatically part of these collections, at least for all systems collection. If you see at that time, if a machine is not have any site code, meaning the boundaries are not configured properly, you have to fix that first. Okay, if you try to install the client, it might not work because it does not have a proper boundary or boundary group is configured for that machine. You might have to look into that direction. Guys, if you're a fan of PowerPoint, this is how it looks in your mind now. So think about it. You have a central administration site. Okay, what we're talking about the boundaries and boundary groups. Okay, you might have a central site with some series of subnet, and now you might have an additional location called SFO region. This is Tokyo, this is London. So every location has its own primaries and secondaries. You would be configuring that location specific boundary groups. Okay, so you could configure this entire group as the boundary group called SFO, and this entire group as Tokyo, Paris. Like this you might be configuring. So within this SFO there are two boundary groups out there. One starts with the 10.1, other one starts with the 10.3. But if you have integrated with Active Directory, you can simply browse and configure. That's the one advantage if you have the Active Directory integrated, because your AD team already configures properly these subnetting information. So you might be have a question, hey, I'm a very basic guy. What if they don't configure properly subnetting within my Active Directory sites? If I switch back to my Active Directory, my friends, this is where you configure your subnets from an Active Directory point of view. Let's say in my Hyderabad location, I have newly introduced a new subnet called 10 series example. Just an example case I wanted to explain with the 8 series example. I might have to add it like this as an Active Directory administrator. Okay, how would I know as an Active Directory administrator is I would go and check with my network team, hey, what is that new subnet you are creating in my Hyderabad location? They would come up and say, hey, I'm going to create this subnet, so the clients will receive this IP address range within this subnet. Then what you do, you would use that and you would configure here as an Active Directory administrator. What does it mean? If you don't configure, what would happen is within this series of 10 series example, I don't have, but my client machines have already an IP address within the 10 series, but the network team never communicated to Active Directory team, and Active Directory team never communicated to SCCM team, or SCCM team never using the one site name called Hyderabad. Okay, so what would happen is within this 10 series, so which we are going to create, for example, network team has created like this /8 series. So within this subnet, the machines can be part of your Active Directory. However, it cannot get a proper group policy. So they would definitely have an issue with the group policy, right? That's the first thing. So people will complain, hey, I don't have a proper GPU, so not getting applied. It might be slow in a login, all of that stuff. Definitely some of the tickets gets created and it would be paused back, and then they would, investigate from an Active Directory point of view, and they would definitely fix this problem. Okay. Now, from SCCM team point of view, you always try to use AD site names. That would actually gives you a more value, because if your new offices or any network changes happens on a subnet level, you no need to worry about for that office location, because it would be covered by your AD team or your network team by this time. So all you have to do is Hyderabad. If you remember in the past or the last 15 minutes back, we were talking about the subnet. So I had this subnet. What if I come up with a new subnet just like this for my new office, or maybe new floor came with a new requirement, new project team, new subnet, new server subnet example, or new DMZ subnet. In that case, since it doesn't matter for us, because we already using this site name as a Hyderabad, so it would consider even this subnet also. How would I know is if I just go back to the properties of this subnet ID properties, you would find out here site name as this. This is how it's gonna work, and it uses that subnet information to receive the content and site code information. I hope I made it very easy for you. If you really like this entire explanation, give it thumbs up, man. That doesn't cost you anything for you. Now let's move to the next topic called discovery methods. So what exactly discovery method? By this time, I have indirectly explained to you about this topic, like you could see here within this ConfigMgr, okay, whatever the workstations you have, whatever the user accounts you have, all of them have to be discovered, right? So how you're going to discover? So if you ask me, hey, is it a mandatory to discover every computer? The first statement you must have to understand is no. Without discovering also, you can install configuration manager client software, or you call it as a SCCM software. Okay, you install that client software, it works. Okay, so why we are talking about then the discovery methods? So it's gonna make it easy for us, okay, in terms of having the discovery methods. Okay, so let me ask you here at this point of time, hey, discovery is a mandatory? No, it's not a mandatory thing. And is it any advantages you have? Yes, you have an advantage if you configure discovery methods, because you would discover every machine and every resource, and then you could see in the easiest way if that machine has already installed the ConfigMgr client or not, by going into the console just like this. So since I discovered this machine example, I could see here, hey, the client is installed. No, I don't have a client is installed. So now you know how many machines are discovered, how many machines does not have a client software. You can easily find out. Is that the only thing is useful? No. There are a couple of things without having agent you could find out. For example, if you just go to this properties of this machine, example case I'm talking about, you see here the assigned site information. Similarly, I should be able to find out the subnet information, IP address of the computer. Say this is a computer, IP address is 90. If you remember in my lab, I gave you the in a video one with the IP address as 90. So that's the same IP address. My subnet gateway, and all of this information, including the operating system and its version, all of that information without having the client software you have discovered. You might have having a question, hey, what is that thing, it is useful? Hey friends, you could create a collection of all the resources that belongs to Hyderabad location, because Hyderabad location was discovered as part of the without the client software as my location. For example, if I just give here, oops, so AD site name, it can Active Directory site name, it is discovered as a Hyderabad, right? So you could create a collection based on Active Directory site name. So now you know within that Hyderabad location how many machines do not have a client. You can split it in case, just in case if you wanted. So uh, without the client also, you can get some kind of advantages when you configure discovery methods. So let's go back to the discovery methods. What are the discovery methods that you have? You see here all these 9 discovery methods that you have. Total 9. Okay, total 9. But if you go to the SCCM console, there would be only 6 discovery methods you should be able to see. Okay, let's go back to the discovery from ConfigMgr console. So if I ask you, where should I go? I should be going to the administration and then going to the discovery methods, because this is the first time configuration. Once we configure, we're never going to touch up this almost until unless there is a new change comes up, right? So you see here, this is the discovery method name of the discovery method name, and whether it is enabled or not. Hey, if you see here, we didn't configure anything, but it is enabled state. Yes, my friends, this is a heartbeat discovery. It gets by default enabled. Okay, every discovery method is meant for a different purpose. If you see here, this is the Active Directory users discovery. So it's going to discover all the users within the Active Directory as the name suggested. And this is going to discover all the Active Directory within the AD. All the systems would be discovered. This talks about the if you just look at here, it would talk about the group specific information can be discovered. Okay, and if you have a multiple domains, multiple forests, then you would be using the Active Directory forest discovery. So it's gonna discover all the subnets that you know it would discover, so that you could later point create a boundaries out of it. So discoveries are different method, but I talked about 9 discovery methods, but if you look at here, count it, there is only 6. The remaining discovery methods would be only visible when you go back to the advanced topics with the cloud attached. There you would be able to discover related to the Azure Active Directory or Entra. Now we call it as a Microsoft Entra related user discovery groups and user group discovery methods can be configured here. So these two we would be talking in the advanced topics. When we move to the cloud management gateway, all of that's advanced topics. During the cloud attach we would talk, but here I can talk about what it does is it is going to discover all the Active Directory. In this case, right here, Azure Active Directory users discovery, this is going to discover all the user group, but from Azure Active Directory point of view. That's how it's going to used. Okay, so now you know what are the discovery methods, and I'm going to really teach you in the easiest way. Thank you for being patiently listening so far. I really have to appreciate you, because these the people who are listening here are really showing their interest, and they wanted to learn in depth of the concept. Okay, because I'm going to teach you now easy way to remember the log files, and more from a troubleshooting point of view also. Okay, my friends, so now we're going to learn these and we're going to configure even these things. So let's go back to the SCCM server. Now let's configure one by one. So first thing first, if I start configure this, it's going to create the log files. How would I know? So configuration manager would talk about everything logs. The logs are the key. If you understand the logs, it becomes easy for you. Okay, if you want to learn SCCM, first learn about the components. So how would I learn the components is I might be deviating a little bit, but try to get this core concept. You might have to click on a monitoring and click on anywhere under system status. You might be getting here something called the ConfigMgr or configuration manager service manager. So this is going to show you all the components that are related to the SCCM server, or Microsoft Configuration Manager server. So these all are the internal components. So however human body is there, like heart, lungs, all of that. Similarly, a SCCM or ConfigMgr works based on these components. If any of the component gets failed, it doesn't work. For example, I want to work with the discovery. There could be some component within here. So that's in this case the example here I would talk about as your AD discovery agent. This is going to discover the agent base, right? So there could be lot of different components will be there. So if it is installed, it will show. If it is not installed, some of the components might not be showing. But if you ask me what are the important components, executive manager is the one of the important, and of course everything is important, but the core thing would be the executive and component manager uh, itself is the important. Okay, so you would be able to configure these things in a minute or so, but now I will go back to the actual topic, in this case active directory discovery, which is we are going to configure. So in this case I wanted to configure first as the system discovery. So if I just go to the properties of this, okay, I have here couple of tabs. So try to understand couple of tabs. So these tabs, once you understand, it is almost similar for any other discovery method. So the first option is during this system discovery, do you want additional attributes also to be discovered? For example, on a system properties, you might have multiple attributes. We're talking about the system attributes, meaning if I just view in this case by going to Active Directory advanced features, let's say I have one computer under India region, maybe in Hyderabad some of the computers, maybe some workstations, laptops. So in this case I got some workstations. So if I just go to the properties under attributes, I have all these attributes, right? So let's say I wanted to have some information, for example, employee. Definitely for computer there will not be an employee ID, but for users it might be useful for you, right? Similarly, some additional information you want to collect apart from the information that is actually able to discover as a default. So you see these are the default information it is gonna discover, like host name, account control, logged in timestamp, distinction name. These are the things it's gonna default, it's gonna discover. So it's not only discovering the computer attributes also it's gonna discover, and it's gonna populate it for you. You understand here the key concept? It's not just the discovering the computer name or the system name, it is also discovering additional attributes information. Also you could discover, for example, I wanted to discover in this case when the computer account is going to expire, example. So I could simply add it here as an additional attribute, but I don't want to add here at this point of time, but you could include just in case if you wanted. So this is what the active directory attributes. Now you understand on these discovery almost everywhere you have similar attributes, that's gonna extended attributes also can be collected. Now click on options. Now think about it, my friends. Let's say there is an employee who joined maybe 1 year back and he left the company, lost 90 days. Still the computer account will be visible under all systems. Here it will still come up, but definitely you don't need, right? Because the user is no more, the computer is no more. So you want to work with only valid computers. So how you're going to validate it is, in the past you have to go back and check in the AD whether computer object is there, the account is really active, the user is really active. All of that headache used to be there. Now with the latest versions of ConfigMgr, you have these options. You can only discover and work with last 90 days if there is an activity within Active Directory, discover. Otherwise don't even pull up in the console. It's easy, right? Very useful. And the second thing, hey, only discover the computers that the computer account password is given within the 90 days. Means the user is logged on, and he's, when every computer will have a password also, that's called computer account password. So the password is automatically updates whenever it try to contact with Active Directory, there is some specific threshold is available. Okay, so now you say within 90 days, if it is not updated password or if it is not even logged on that computer, nobody within 90 days, don't pull up into the console from Active Directory. Nice option, right? Now, when talk about the pollings, hey, you have been talking about all of this stuff, but when it has to do some kind of discovery, so the discovery would happen every 7 days once, meaning within Active Directory. Example, last 1 hour back somebody's newly joined, example, hey, can we discover his computer name? If you configure 7 days, yes, still you could even discover, because you're going to do something called a delta discovery. So every 15 minutes, this is one of the recommended configuration. If you have below 50,000 computers, you can go for 15 minutes as the interval from a design point of view. So within that 15 minutes, when new user object or new computer object gets created, it's going to discover as the delta. So the full sync would happen every 7 days, but the delta would happen every 15 minutes. So all the time the new computer gets discovered within this interval. So you can configure from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. So go for 15 minutes to 30 minutes based on the your requirement. Why did I use a word called requirement? Why did I use why shouldn't I configure as a 5 minutes? Imagine, my friends, you might have a let's say 300,000 objects. So the SCCM component have to go and discover. If it is taking 5 minutes time, example, it's okay, less than 5 minutes. But what if it is taking 20 minutes to discover the 300,000 devices or 300,000 objects? So it will go in a loop altogether. So you shouldn't be doing that kind of configuration, aggressive configuration. That's why I use a word called, hey, based on your requirement, based on your design configuration. I already told, if you are using a less than 50,000, go for 15 minutes. If it is more, go for 30 minutes time. That would mostly it will be suitable for you, just in case if you're going to work. Okay, now we talked enough about the discovery, like options, what kind of devices to be discovered, what kind of attributes to be discovered, or any additional custom attributes. We even talked about the schedule, but what to discover, my friends, that's the key, right? I did not talk about what to discover. Now here it is. So when you click on this star, okay, it's going to ask you in a new window, hey, this is actually you're going to work with Active Directory system discovery. So where is that Active Directory? You have to browse. Hey, I wanted to discover Active Directory systems, right? This is a system. So my all systems within India region I wanted to discover. Okay, that's what the browse the path. Let's say if you give here, what would happen is within this computers also it would discover. If I give here only India, so within India only it gets discovered, it will simply ignore my domain controllers, it will ignore my computers, or if I have maybe US region here and an additional OU, it will ignore. So where you're going to target is the key. So in my case, since it is a test lab, instead of I more specific, I'm targeting here. Even in a production also, if you configure at the top level, it doesn't matter, but think about it, how you're going to configure. Okay, that would be a definitely a design question, my friends. Okay, so in my case, I'm configuring here the complete root of my domain, and now discover objects within Active Directory groups. Let's say they could be, you created a computer groups also by creating a security group, and you added all the computers to that AD group. Then it still discovered that information also, grouping information also. For example, you wanna exclude something, you should always do it. For example, I don't want to discover EU region. Example, you could always use this kind of exclusions. There could be some companies definitely comes up like, hey, I have my DMZ, I don't want to discover, can I exclude it? Yes, my friends, you could do this kind of exclusions. This is how it's gonna work. Okay, but in my case, I'm not gonna do it. And now how you're going to discover is you would be using with the SCCM server computer account. That means the machine has to be part of your Active Directory, then only you could do it. If it is a cross forest, you should be giving here a new account, which is that cross forest account you would be configuring, so that it will go and use that account to discover. So most of the cases, trust me, you would be using the computer account to discover. That's it. Uh, that's it. This is how you configure. But now to enable this component, I use a vertical component. Why? Because if you see here in the components, it might not be there. The SMS underscore 80 specific component is not available. You see here there's no component, so it gets created as soon as we apply here. And also additional log file gets created once the component gets installed. So in my case, I think I installed in the E drive, so I would point to E drive ConfigMgr, and under logs you would get here some log, right? So what is that log file? How to remember? I'm gonna give you as a bonus tip in this case. Okay, so let's first click on apply. So as soon as you click on apply, it says, hey, do you want to run now full discovery? Because in the past the full discovery was not ran, right? So click on yes. Now what happens? A component gets created for the first time. From the next time onwards, the component will trigger. Okay, so I'll just simply here refresh. Okay, I just pressed F5. Okay, now SMS AD system discovery agent got created, and if you query, it might be in a stopped state. Reason being, it doesn't need to be run all the time, right? Discovery, oh, luckily it is actually running now. But if I query after a couple of minutes again, it might be stopped, because once the discovery process completes, it has to go to a sleep state. That's what it's going to do at this point of time. Okay, so see, the query is actually stopped. Now you might be asking, hey, is there any log file? Yes, log files gets created, and it is easy, my friends. So as we talked in the past, this is a big bonus for you. Okay, if you're a hardcore of SCCM and you want to learn that, this is a big trick for you. So SCCM works based on the components. Every component will have a log file. How do I know? If you know the components, try to read all these component names. For example, collections will update by using this log file, this component, right? If a collection is not getting updated, this is the component that's going to talk about it. And what is a log file? For that, if you just right click on it, logging, you would see the log file location along with the log name. Okay, one more additional bonus would be the size of the log is maximum 2 MB. So you could configure for few of the logs as a architect level. For example, management point will be there. That's very key, right? You don't want to override this management point specific log file. You could configure here 5 MB. So that's a more than enough 5 MB log file. So the MP control will get created a maximum of 5 MB logs. Okay, and now coming back to the out of the bonus tip. So how do I remember is you could go back to the logging and see this is a log file, right? So you might be still not interested to learn this way. I would easy way give you. So if you just go back to the logs folder, this is where the logs always recorded under server specific. So if it is a server, SCCM server or ConfigMgr server, under program files ConfigMgr, and then logs will be get created. Now within this, all the log files there, so mostly 100 and plus logs will be there. Okay, it's easy to remember 100 and plus these logs also if you can understand the components. Okay, I have been enforcing, because I want you to become as an expert into the ConfigMgr by remembering, by learning these components. Okay, now look at this, the log that got created AD sys this. So now AD stands here Active Directory, SIS is the system, DIS is the discovery. Now you can easily remember Active Directory System Discovery Log. That's it. That's easy to remember. If you don't like it, press the dislike button. If you like it, click on that like button, boss. Okay, so click on that log file, and you could always open the log file with the cmtrace log file, or cmtrace is the log. log viewer, you could use that log. Okay, otherwise if you try to open in a notepad, you might not be able to read properly like this. Instead, use a tool called configuration manager trace logging tool, which is available on the ConfigMgr server. Wherever you install, within that under tools, you would be able to see here under tools, these all are the different purpose. You would be using different tools. Okay, for example, port configuration, you would look at client specific tools can be configured, whether the policy K or power management policies are configured. Like that, many tools are available at this point of time. Relevant tool is CM trace. Throughout this playlist, throughout this course, you would be learning CM trace, which is useful for reading the logs. So with this, if I just open up, it says that, hey, I got this new a thread as a component got started under SMS underscore executive. What is that? If you remember, I told SMS executive is the one of the key component, because within this component, sub components gets triggered. So this is gonna call other components along with the component manager. So if you see here, SMS executive started this component. I'm trying to read the log for you so that you could learn more, because I'm not gonna repeat the same things again and again for other discovery methods. I would definitely go quicker, but since this is the first discovery method that we are gonna learn, I have to teach you in a depth. Okay, in depth. So if you see here, it is connected to the server, and next there is something called inbox source. So what is inbox is? Inbox is the, here if you just go to the program files, configuration manager, this is what the inbox is. So every component that we learned so far will have its own folder. Within this folder, there could be multiple folders. Again, within this folder, as I said earlier, multiple folder. What is that? Is like, some of them are retry, some of them will have in process. For example, if we look at here, in the beginning of this log, it said that this is the inbox server. So within this inbox server, within this inbox server, this is where under auth DDM box, it has created some file. Okay, so if I just navigate to inboxes, go to DDM box, within this DDM box, you have a bad DDRs, you have a data collection. Okay, there are different files gets created. Okay, so what happens is SCCM will work in such a way, it will actually create its own file information, and that file gets read by your component manager, your executive manager, and then it will write that information into the database. Before writing into the SCCM database, before writing it, it actually creates some kind of temporary files inside of the inboxes with a relevant component. Okay, that being said, let's learn what is that. If we just go back here, so we said we know now inbox will have subfolders. So what happened is, within this, it is actually checking for the configuration. Hey, the number of days we configured as a 90 days, last password and active should be there, and it is trying to search for the entire domain. Okay, and this is a search path. Okay, and now it's time for us to search, right? So when the schedule begins, it is actually querying all inside of the OUs. If you see, this is additional OU called users, this is additional OU called guest, this is the printers or backup operator. So like this, recursive, it is searching for all the groups. If any computer is part of that group, or any of the computer is available, in this case, if you see here, Hyderabad OU, which is inside OU called India, it is actually searching, and if any computer found, it actually writing that information. If you see here, there's a computer found called inhyd-windows 10 Win10. This computer information found. So what it does, it actually writing, read here my friends, read here, the highlighted one, writing for the system as some file ending with a DDR inside the ddm.box file it has created. If you go back and see, there's no file. Do you see? We are in the right path, ddm.box. There's no file. What happens is, once the files got created, okay, like that, it will create for all the discovered computers. So let me show you one more also. So one of the machines it found, okay, let's see, this is the one other one, yeah, CM01. This is a CM01. This is for Windows 10, right? So what happened, it has created different file name. So if you see here, this time it has created with a random name dot ending with a DDR file, and for this is a random name with a DDR file. What happens is these files gets created into a DDM box. After that, it actually writes that information into the database, meaning it will process. I would say process is the right word. Okay, so it will process it and it will write down. So what happens after that is, once it discovered, it has to come to collections. So whatever you're going to work with the discovery method, it has interlinked with the collections. So what are the collections we talked about in the beginning? Like you might have a device collections or you might have a user collections, right? So in a inside users, there's nothing, the member count, but earlier we have a very less, now we have a 6, that's a 2 more added. So if I just double click on all systems, the 2 more which were discovered here, like DC01 and Win01 got coming up here with the site code information. How this entire thing happened is, it actually started that discovery method as a component. It created some DDM file inside that DDR file, and that file got processed. And now in the back end, it also processed the collections, because the collection also have to be updated. So internally, collections also triggered, my friends. Okay, if I just go back to the logs, okay, they could be collections. So if you read what is a log file, so you can think about there should be a component, right? SMS underscore. You might have a question, why everywhere SMS? Because this product initially released as SMS with the name systems management server. That's a name. Okay, that's why still the core structure was not changed. So SMS underscore collection specific. So you just try to look at here, cloud collection. So this is the collection. So what is the log file you have to look at? So you see here, call eval.log. So just read this, collection evaluator. COLL is first 4 characters and eval is the evaluator. So that's a log file. So I would open up collection evaluator log file and see here. So it might be processed during this time. So what was the time? Timestamp, if you look at here, 11:38. So if you look at after 11:38, by going up, okay, 36, 37, 38 from here on, wait time for 1 minute, timeout. So this is where 38, 1, it came, and then slowly it has processed here. Number of collections total 13, 3 machines got processed. So found 4 candidates for collection implements. So it has processed. So this is the ID. Every collection will have an ID. Okay, meaning if you look at here, the collections, these collections will have its own ID. So if you just right click on this, you see here collection ID also can be configured to visible. So if I just put it here, so SMS all zeros 1 is a collection ID number 1. So this has been processed. So that's how the collection was processed, and then we were able to see the new time. 2 entries changed. If you see here, after 11:40, that's after exactly 2 minutes, the 3 incremental updates happen and 2 entries changed. The 2 entries are nothing but these 2 machines. Earlier we used to have a 4. Now we got DC and this has been added. That's how it is processed in the back end. Now we configure one discovery method. Now we know what is happening in the backend, how it is actually coming up, like including the component we know, including the inbox files that gets created, it will be processed. Later point it goes to collections with the collection evaluator, right? Just in case if the collection is not updated, because it took 2 minutes time, right? If I have not explained to you by this time, and if immediately go and check it, it might not be available at 11:39 time, right? So PM time. So what you could have do is I could have actually updated the collection membership. How would I update is I simply go to the collection, right click, update collection membership. So what would happen? It actually immediately updates the collection membership. You could find out in the collection evaluator log. So if you see here, this entire process has been automatically run because we just updated the full cycle. Okay, so that's how it's going to happen, so that you would definitely see here the new resources just in case if they are found. Okay, now we know it a little deeper about one discovery method. Let's continue with the further discovery methods. As you know that we were talking about other discovery methods, which is Active Directory specific. We talked about only system discovery, so that systems are discovered. Now let's talk about the users discovery. If you learn out of this video, subscribe to this channel. Subscribing won't cost you a coin, but it has extreme value to me. Subscribing may seem very small to you, but its impact is more on me. It's a vote of confidence that keeps me excited about creating more fresh, insightful content when you subscribe. Subscribing is a win-win situation. You ask any question or post any questions in the comments. As a new thread, you would be getting within 10 minutes a response back. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. Subscribe. So for users also, we have collections. So if you just go back to the assets and complaints, you also have a users collections. So most of the people, at least the beginning of their career with the ConfigMgr, they might not be using the users collection, but this is also a very powerful method. So you see here, you have the users and groups. So you simply create any users or direct a user specific or maybe a group specific also, but you do not have any count because it's not even discovered. So let's configure that discovery method. So I would go to the administration discovery method from the hierarchy configuration, and then simply select the Active Directory user discovery. So simply, now attributes, additional attributes can be configured, that otherwise it's going to only discover these things. It made simple for you, and this is where it's going to cover your full cycle every 7 days. For Delta, you can configure as a 15, and now this is where you're going to configure with this star button, and you would show the container where you have a users. For example, I have all the users under users container. I would choose. Otherwise, I would choose the India region. Within this, I wanted only Hyderabad users to be only discovered. I can configure like this. This again applicable same case. You could discover. You could exclude here by configuring here, and you could also configure this for cross forest with a different account by configuring. So it made easy, right? If you learn one discovery method in depth, it becomes very easy, right? So we configure these things, click on OK. Now it's time for us to enable this. So if you don't enable this, it's not going to enable the component, right? So if you see here, there's only one component at this point of time we did not enable. Let's say simply open up this. So we have only AD system component. We don't have Active Directory system component, right? So the user component. So it's going to cover up. So apply. It says, hey, do you want to run a full? Yes. Apply. Okay. So what would happen? First, the component gets installed. Okay. So after that, it will automatically start the component. So you see here, the component got enabled called AD user discovery agent, and also the log file gets created here with the same similar name, AD sys instead of the sys. ADUS, that's a user specific. So it's going to come up. So you see here, if as soon as I refresh, AD user discovery, same method. So easy to remember. If you just open up this, it has just finished the discovery method. So you can go back to here. The component has initiated, and the inbox it has configured. It is trying to discover the entire route, every OU path or every container it is trying to search. At the end, it says, hey, I found these many files. So you see here, everything is coming up. Finally, it will say, hey, I found total 4 objects. So it should ideally show 4 objects if I go back to my collections. You see here, there's nothing has been, updated, even though if I do, simple refresh, because the collection cycle is not yet updated, my friends. So if it is not updated, either you have to wait for the delta update of 15 minutes, or you have to, right click and update the membership. So if you just update its own membership of all users, it will be visible that 4 or whatever the discover object. So in this case, it said 4, right here, 4 objects. It should come up under users collection. So it's still hourglass is that it might take some time to actually update, because it has to retrieve the information from the database. So it takes some minutes. Oh, I clicked on it, so copy, so that it create the same collection. I'm sorry for that. Let me delete this. But this is a collection. Instead of copy, instead of the update, I clicked on a copy. Oops, sorry for that. But membership to be updated. Now the 4 objects that as per the log was it is able to visible. So if I just double click on it, it would be able to see my account names. So let's say I want to target some application for test user. Now I can create a dedicated collection and target based on this user. Or if I want to find out what is that user, in this case the test user is using the computer name, I should be able to find out from my reports. So this is where the discovery also will be useful, right? So similarly, we also have the group discovery, which is again Active Directory specific. So I'm going to configure here 15, and there's nothing much here. You can only discover that are based on the logs within the 90 days, which is active ideally. Okay, and I'm going to enable this and add here location, in this case the entire Active Directory. So with this discovery method, it is gonna discover all the group membership, basically like OU name, the computer or user object where it is in the OU. That information it actually gives you, and also the member of what all the AD groups also you could pull up. So I would be able to give here some name like AD group and simply apply OK. This is going to create. So what would happen ideally, in a faster way, now all the components gets created. For example, in this case, the group specific component should be created like this, security group discovery, and this gets triggered automatically with the help of SMS executive or maybe the component manager. And then a new log gets created for us. So in this case, sys discovery is there already, sys group. So as soon as I refresh, AD SGS is a system, G is a group, so system group discovery log file, it gets created. All that it would process, and it would clean up if any kind of machines to be deleted as per the obsolete configuration we have configured as a 90 days. So it would discover, and finally it gets updated. That's what it does, my friends, in the discovery. Now 3 discovery methods. Now let's also configure forest discovery. Forest discovery would actually, when you enable, it's going to automatically create Active Directory site, boundaries, and IP address ranges automatically, and this is going to retry by running every 1 week. So it actually helps a lot. So for this also, in the backend, a component gets created, a log file gets created, okay, and that information would be populated. Where it's going to populate it is inside administration under boundaries. A new subnets gets created, just in case if you forget to create them, it would be listed automatically for you, and that information will be useful for us. For example, here this subnet complete range was automatically created by AD discovery, forest discovery. I did not create it, right? This is automatically coming up from the range specific with the help of forest. Just in case if you forget also, you would be able to see and come back here for the group count. Just in case if it is not there, you can simply add the grouping with the boundary group, simply, for example, India region. So once you associated, automatically within this range of computers also gets the content management point, site code, all of that stuff can be automatically done. That's where it's going to useful, my friends. Okay, now the discovery methods that are mentioned, but I did not talk about the heartbeat discovery. Heartbeat discovery is the discovery mechanism which will say that, hey, the client is alive I said alive. The client is alive. So it is useful in order to say all the time the client is still valid, still available. That kind of information it will write within the database called clear flag. We call this as a clear flag information as part of the maintenance task. So this has to be configured as a 1 week only. Do not change this configuration because there is a maintenance tasks depends on this task. So we would cover in the site maintenance task about the heartbeat discovery, but at the high level if you want to learn, so if you just click on the sites, click on your site name, and inside this you have a settings and click on site maintenance. So there is something called a clear install flag option will be there. That is one of the maintenance tasks that would automatically remove if a client machine is not alive, not discovered, okay, then it would automatically delete. So that information would be available within this one of the maintenance tasks called clear install flag. In this case it is not configured, right? So if you see, it is not configured. So with the site maintenance task, let's say if you configure there as a 1 week, so multiply that number with 3. That's a formula you should use based on my experience. So within 21 days, if any machine is not active, not reported back, so it will say that client is not installed. That's how it's going to do. So if I just click on apply, okay, what would happen is if a client was already installed but it was not communicated with the configuration manager server for the last 21 days, then the client installed yes to, it becomes as a no. So in a console it will update as a no. After 90 days still the client is not communicated, it gets automatically deleted. So that's how it is useful in the backend, that heartbeat discovery. Okay, so these are the maintenance tasks that we would working in a different lecture, where you could even configure your backup or your hardware inventory, how many days you have to store, right? So the hardware inventory keep on coming, but the database gets store, but somewhere you have to delete, right? So that's where you would be configuring these maintenance tasks. We call it, these are the maintenance tasks, which we would be learning in a different lecture altogether. But for now you know the discovery methods like heartbeat discovery along with that active directory specific for. Now what if you do not have active directory, right? Imagine this is a valid business case. You might have a DMZ zone, right? So within the DMZ or the isolated network, all the machines will be public internet facing machines, will have only in a work group. So can I discover that? Yeah, you could. What if I don't have active directory? Can I use the ConfigMgr? Yes, you could use it by configuring the network discovery method. So what would happen is network discovery is gonna useful in terms of the subnets. You would normally configure like this subnets. You would configure your domain names just in case if you are using. You could even detect your SNMP devices like maybe routers, printers, all of that, also including DHCP scope options, all of that, and then you could schedule it so that during that time all these domains, SNMP devices or the subnets, it will scan. For example, if I give here a subnet of 10 dot example with the 255, so it's gonna discover all of that machines within the subnet. It will go and search. It starts from within the step 10 series. All of that machines will be discovered and it will be shown in the assets and complaints if they exist. Same thing goes in the domains and SNMP devices also. Okay, you could enable the topology and the client operating systems. All of that would be automatically discovered. My friends, honestly, nobody uses network discovery. That's why I'm not going to cover on that in detail, but the entire process remains same, like starting with the component, log file, and coming back to the collections. It remains same. Okay, that being said, we covered now two things. Boundaries we covered, boundary groups we covered discovery methods. At the same time, we also touched the components, we touched the collections partially. So now we're in a good shape to install the client. But remember, what is a client? Client is in a software that will always communicate with the server software, right? So now you have a server software, you have a client software, but client has to do some periodic, some configuration, like it has to install maybe some software like MS Office, or it has to send the hardware inventory or software inventory. Who's going to decide that? It's going to decided by some of the site roles we'll talk about. So let's actually configure that site roles. So if you go back to the site roles, you have a multiple roles are configured here. So by default, when you are installing, management point role will be installed, and also distribution point role will be installed. So you might have a thought by this time, if I have a roles, means I might have some kind of components. You look at here, MP, so SMS underscore MP, they could be MP control manager component, MP file dispatch. Similarly, for the distribution, you might have something like content transfer specific, or distribution point specific, or the package file transfer, or policy providing. All these are the different components that also enables as soon as you enable these roles. But in fact, these roles were enabled by default. We did not configure this. Okay, so to install the client, you need to have definitely a DP role. You need to have a management point role so that they can communicate. So you might be thinking that it's a working SCCM environment, right? But it might not be the case, my friend. So you could actually monitor by this, from this monitoring under system status, look at the core components or core roles that are enabled. So if you see anywhere these, instead of the green as a red or warning, there could be some errors, or there could be some warnings, right? So now we talk about the hierarchy manager. It talks about warning. So let's have a look on what is that warning it is talking about. So I got an error. It says that, hey, I detected this as the database specific information on a port. I'm not able to communicate because it does not have a port was enabled on a firewall like 1433 and 4022. Just in case, if you have similar errors, you might have to resolve it. So this error keep on coming. You see here the port specific keep on coming from 23rd to 24th till today. So meaning it has a real problem, right? You just have to enable that firewall port. So let me enable by going to the firewall.cpl and advanced settings. So here I want to enable SQL port. So I could configure here port specific information and say 1433 and 4022. That's what this error. So look at this error, what it is talking about. So it's talking about 1433 4022 error, or these ports are not available, not active on a firewall. That's what it is checking inside the components, inside this firewall ports. So I would simply say hello, all these configuration, SQL ports hello. This is the rule that I'm actually configuring on my server. So that's it. Now the ports are enabled. So after a couple of minutes, what should happen ideally is this error should go automatically. What I would do is, I would whether this error is uh, gone or not, how would I check is, I would go to the reset count of all my warning, meaning I will marking as, hey, I resolve this problem. That's what I'm marking here. It doesn't remove the messages. It says that I fixed this, reset. So it will go and check after a couple of minutes to this component. You see here, SMS underscore hierarchy manager. This is where the component, right? So SMS underscore hierarchy manager. So this component will be queried after some time by on its own schedule. If not, if you want to force it, you could always do as the stop and restart the hierarchy manager component, then automatically it will trigger immediately, and that information you should be able to find out within the log. So what is the log file for this? You could right click and find out hman.log file, right? That's a log file. So simply I go to the any of the log CM trace, I could say hman.log file. So since I just started, it is actually doing all these checks again in the backend. So in the past, it might be saying about the firewall ports, right? So now it might not be talking about the firewall ports related. If you see in the past, the log file was written here a couple of minutes back. Hey, I don't have this firewall ports or not available. Now, if I just go and check on this and up and 1433, all these ports not active still on 12:15. Now what's the time? It is actually 12:25 plus. So it might be taking some more time to check on that, and it will come back and say, hey, you have fixed this problem. So ideally this also gets into the green state. So this is how you would be looking into the logs and the components. I would like to pause here because this has been more than 1.5 hours already, or close to 2 hours. I would cover in the next part about the client installation and the client installation methods, all of that stuff, which is pending from my end. Trust me, I'm going to come up there. And for the Active Directory discovery we covered, but not the Azure Active Directory. We are going to cover that in the next slides. So you can expect in the next video about the client installation. How can you deep dive into the client installation and the log file views? So I would be definitely catching you there. Until that time, thank you for watching this. I'll catch you next lecture.